The termination meeting lasted exactly 7 minutes. I sat across from Derek Walsh, my manager of 3 years, while Angela from HR slid a folder across the conference table. The overhead lights hummed. Derek wouldn't meet my eyes. "We're letting you go, effective immediately," Angela said. Her voice was rehearsed, clinical. "Budget restructuring." I nodded slowly, trying to process the words. Budget restructuring. I'd seen the quarterly reports. We weren't struggling. This was something else. Derek finally looked up, and that's when he said it. The line that would replay in my head for weeks. "You're easy to replace, Vanessa." He almost smiled when he said it, like he'd been waiting to deliver that punch. I'm Vanessa Torres. I'm 35 years old. I'd spent 6 years at Northpoint Analytics, the last 3 managing data infrastructure for our largest accounts. I wasn't flashy. I didn't self-promote. I just made sure everything worked. Angela pushed a pen toward me. "Sign here, here, and here." My hand moved automatically. "Sign, initial, date." "Badge and laptop, please," Derek said. I unclipped my security badge and set it on the table. The laptop followed. As I stood, my legs felt disconnected from my body. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. The walk through the office was worse than the firing itself. I kept my head up, forced my expression neutral. But I could feel eyes tracking my movement. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Keyboards went quiet. Nobody looked at me directly. They all found sudden, urgent interest in their screens. I passed Melissa's desk. We'd had lunch together every Thursday for 2 years. She was typing furiously, her jaw tight, pretending she didn't see me. Past the break room where I'd celebrated birthdays, project launches, small victories that felt big at the time. Past the conference room where I'd given presentations, solved crises, stayed late to fix problems that weren't technically mine. The elevator took forever to arrive. I stood there, aware of the silence spreading behind me, the weight of being erased while still breathing. When the doors finally opened, I stepped inside and turned around. Through the glass walls of the office, I could see Derek watching from his desk. Arms crossed, satisfied. The doors closed. I reached for my badge out of pure muscle memory, ready to tap out at the security gate in the lobby. Then I stopped. My badge was upstairs on Derek's conference table. But when I pushed through the turnstile, it clicked open anyway. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive. The parking garage was empty at 11 in the morning. Everyone else was working. Everyone else still belonged somewhere. My phone buzzed. A work email notification. I pulled it out, expecting to see my account disabled. Instead, new messages were loading. Calendar invites. Project updates. A reminder about tomorrow's client call. They hadn't shut anything down. I stared at the screen, watching emails populate in real time. My calendar still showed meetings for the next 2 weeks. My access to the company drives, the client databases, the infrastructure systems I'd built from scratch. All of it still active. I could see everything. Do anything. The professional thing would be to call IT. Tell them about the oversight. Make sure my access was revoked properly. I closed my phone and set it face down on the passenger seat. Derek's voice echoed in my head. Easy to replace. I started the car and drove home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the meeting. The way Derek had smirked, the way Angela had avoided eye contact, the way my colleagues had pretended I'd already disappeared. Easy to replace. I opened my laptop around midnight, just to check. My credentials still worked. Every system, every database, every administrative panel I'd managed for 6 years, all of it accessible. I didn't change anything, didn't delete anything, didn't even download files. I just looked. And I realized something that made my stomach turn. Nobody else knew how any of this actually worked. 6 years ago, I'd been so grateful just to have the job. I was 30, coming off a rough patch. A startup had collapsed, taking my savings and confidence with it. I'd sent out hundreds of applications before Northpoint called. The interview was with Derek's predecessor, a man named Frank, who actually listened when I talked about data architecture. He hired me as a junior analyst with a promise. Work hard, and there's room to grow. I worked hard. I learned every system, mapped every process, stayed late when migrations ran long, came in early when servers needed monitoring. Frank noticed. He gave me more responsibility, better projects. When he retired 18 months later, I thought I'd be promoted to lead the team. Instead, they hired Derek. Derek came from outside the company, brought in to modernize operations. He had an MBA and a lot of ideas about disruption and agility. He didn't have much understanding of what we actually did. His first week, he called me into his office. "Frank said you're the one who keeps things running," Derek said. "I need you to be honest with me. What's broken that I should know about?" I gave him a full rundown. System vulnerabilities, process gaps, client accounts that needed attention. He took notes, nodded seriously, told me I was invaluable. The extra work started small. Derek would swing by my desk with a quick request. "Can you handle this client report? Just this once." I said yes. Of course I said yes. Then it was weekend deployments, emergency fixes, projects that weren't in my job description but needed someone who understood the infrastructure. "You're the only one I trust with this," Derek would say. My workload doubled, then tripled. I was managing data pipelines for our 5 largest accounts, training new hires, documenting systems, and covering gaps whenever someone called in sick. No title change, no raise, just more responsibility. Meanwhile, Derek hired Trevor, a guy who'd worked at his previous company. Trevor was 27, confident, and good at presentations. He didn't know our systems, but he knew how to talk about them in ways that impressed executives. 6 months after Trevor started, Derek promoted him to senior analyst. I'd been doing senior-level work for 2 years. When I saw the announcement email, I sat at my desk and stared at my screen for 10 minutes. Then, I went back to fixing the database issue that Trevor had broken that morning. That night, I updated my resume for the first time in years, but I didn't send it anywhere. I told myself I was being ungrateful. I should focus on the work. I finally worked up the courage to ask about advancement during my annual review. Derek leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Vanessa, you do solid work, but senior roles require leadership qualities, visibility, strategic thinking." "I led the migration project last quarter," I said. "I trained 4 new analysts. I've documented our entire infrastructure." "Those are execution tasks," he said. "I need you focused on what you're good at, the behind-the-scenes stuff." Behind the scenes, invisible, easy to overlook. "What would I need to do to be considered for advancement?" I asked. Derek smiled, not a warm smile, a patient smile, like I was a child asking for something unreasonable. "Honestly, you should be grateful you're even here. The market's tough right now. People would kill for your stability." Something shifted in me during that conversation. A wire that had been pulled tight for years finally snapped. I didn't argue, didn't push back. I just said I understand, and left his office. That night, I started keeping records. Every email I sent, every warning I raised, every project I completed. Every time Derek took credit for my work in meetings, every time he dismissed my concerns or assigned me tasks outside my role, I created a folder on my personal drive and backed up everything. I didn't know why yet. I just knew I needed proof that I existed, that I mattered. The tone shifted after that review. Suddenly, I was negative. When I raised concerns about system vulnerabilities, Derek told me to stay in my lane. In meetings, he started talking over me, cutting me off mid-sentence to redirect to Trevor or someone else. My ideas came back as his ideas a week later. I was excluded from planning sessions for projects I'd be responsible for implementing, then blamed when those projects hit problems I'd predicted. "Why didn't you flag this earlier?" Derek demanded during one crisis. I pulled up the email I'd sent 3 weeks prior, the one he'd ignored. "I did flag it," I said. "Here." He barely glanced at his screen. "Well, you should have been more persistent." I started documenting more carefully. Screenshots, time-stamped notes, forwarding important emails to my personal account. The warnings I sent became more detailed, more formal. I made sure everything was in writing. Derek hated it. "You're overthinking again," he'd say. "Just execute." Then one Tuesday, Angela from HR sent a calendar invite. Quick check-in. Nothing formal. My stomach dropped. Nothing formal in HR speak meant something very formal was coming. The check-in was an ambush. Angela sat with a notepad. Derek sat beside her, arms crossed. "We've received feedback about your communication style," Angela began. My communication style. I'd been at North Point for 6 years with 0 complaints. Now suddenly, my communication was a problem. "Several team members feel you've been difficult to work with lately," Derek added. "Resistant to feedback. Negative." I asked for specifics. Names. Examples. They wouldn't provide any. "This is just a conversation," Angela said. "We want to help you improve." But it wasn't a conversation. It was a performance improvement plan without calling it that. A paper trail being built. I left that meeting knowing exactly where this was headed. They were going to fire me. The only question was when. I spent that night updating my documentation. Every project I'd completed, every system I'd built, every warning I'd given that had been ignored. 3 days later, Angela sent another calendar invite. The subject line, "Meeting, urgent." I knew what it meant. I packed my personal items the night before, a photo of my dog, a coffee mug, not much else. The next morning, I walked into that conference room and sat down. Derek wouldn't meet my eyes. And that's when he said it. "You're easy to replace." Now I was home unemployed and watching my former company from the outside. My access should have been revoked immediately. Standard security protocol. But Derek had been so eager to humiliate me that he'd forgotten the basics. I could see everything. The client databases I'd maintained, the automated reports I'd built, the infrastructure monitoring tools I'd configured. I watched them try to operate without me. The first issue appeared within hours. An automated report failed to generate. A client called, asking where their weekly data summary was. I watched Trevor try to fix it. He logged into the wrong system, ran the wrong script. Made it worse, nobody knew where I'd documented the fix procedure, because nobody had ever asked. By end of business, 3 reports were broken. A client database was throwing errors, and the backup system I'd configured was sending warning alerts that nobody knew how to interpret. I closed my laptop and made dinner. My phone rang around 8 p.m. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was local. I answered. "Vanessa?" It was Melissa. "I'm so sorry about what happened. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Listen, I probably shouldn't be calling, but..." She paused. "Do you still have access to the reporting system? Things are breaking, and nobody knows how to fix it." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "I was fired, Melissa. I don't work there anymore." "I know, but Derek's freaking out and Trevor's been trying for hours. I thought maybe you could just tell me where the documentation is." "There is no documentation," I said. "I was going to write it, but I got fired." Silence. "I have to go," I said, and hung up. They hired my replacement in less than a week. Her name was Monica. 29 years old. Half my salary, according to Melissa, who couldn't resist sharing office gossip. Monica had an impressive resume. Big tech companies. Fancy certifications. She looked great on paper. She lasted 4 days before realizing what she'd walked into. I heard about it through Melissa, who'd started texting me regularly. Not to apologize for ignoring me during my walk of shame. She never mentioned that. Just to vent about how chaotic everything had become. "Monica keeps asking where the documentation is," Melissa texted. "Derek keeps telling her to figure it out. She's already talking about quitting." I didn't respond. The system failures were stacking up now. Reports running wrong, client data syncing incorrectly, backup processes failing silently. None of it was catastrophic yet. Just death by 1,000 cuts. The infrastructure I'd built was complex because it had to be. It handled sensitive client data, automated workflows, and real-time reporting for accounts worth millions. I'd spent 6 years refining it. It wasn't built to be simple. It was built to be reliable. And it was built around the assumption that I'd be there to maintain it. Derek had never understood that. He saw systems as black boxes. You put data in, you got results out. Now the black box was breaking, and nobody knew how to open it. 2 weeks after my firing, Derek called me. His number appeared on my phone at 9 p.m. on a Thursday. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Vanessa." His voice was different, softer, almost friendly. "How are you doing?" "Fine," I said. "Listen, I know things ended badly. That wasn't personal. You understand that, right? Just business." I said nothing. "The reason I'm calling," he continued, "we're having some technical issues. Minor stuff, really. But you know our systems better than anyone, and I thought maybe you could help clarify a few things. Just a quick phone call, nothing formal." "What kind of issues?" I asked. "The reporting system. It's generating errors. Monica's trying to fix it, but she's still getting up to speed, and we have a client presentation tomorrow. I just need you to walk us through the reset procedure." There was no reset procedure. The reporting system required manual intervention at the database level. something I'd planned to automate before I got fired. I don't work there anymore, Derek. I know, but this is urgent. Our biggest client is involved. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Send me a consulting contract, I said. My rate is $200 per hour, 4-hour minimum. Silence. Vanessa, come on. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You need consulting services. I'm offering them at market rate. After everything the company did for you. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something that felt like power. Derek didn't call back that night, but Angela from HR emailed me the next morning. The subject line, consulting opportunity. I opened it. Dear Vanessa, we'd like to engage you for a short-term consulting project to assist with system transition. Please see attached agreement. Rate, $75 per hour. Estimated duration, 10 hours. $75 per hour, less than I'd made as a salaried employee. I deleted the email. An hour later, Derek called again. Did you see Angela's email? He asked. No pleasantries this time. I did. And? My rate is $200 per hour, 4-hour minimum. That's $800 for a single session. That's insane. We can't justify that to finance. Then I guess you'll have to figure it out yourself, I said. Vanessa, you're being vindictive. This is a professional. You called me easy to replace, I said. So replace me. I hung up again. That afternoon, Melissa texted, major client just threatened to pull their contract. Derek's in emergency meetings, Monica quit. I turned off my phone and took my dog for a walk. The sky was clear, the air was cold. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. The system failures were accelerating. According to Melissa, who'd become my unofficial inside source, the problems had gone from annoying to critical. Client data was syncing to wrong accounts. Automated workflows were triggering at wrong times. The backup system had failed completely, and nobody knew how to restart it. Trevor had been assigned to fix everything. He'd spent 3 days in the server room and made things worse. He deleted something he shouldn't have, Melissa texted. Now half the reports won't generate at all. I could picture exactly what he'd done. There was a configuration file that looked redundant but wasn't. If you deleted it without updating the dependencies, the entire reporting chain broke. I documented that. In a file called Critical System Dependencies that I'd emailed to Derek 8 months ago. He'd never read it. Now they were paying the price. Senior leadership was asking questions. Why were client deliverables late? Why were reports inaccurate? Why had 2 clients already complained about data quality? Derek was blaming the transition. Growing pains, he called it. But the clients didn't care about his excuses. They cared about their data. And their data was being managed by people who didn't understand the systems. I watched it unfold from the outside, my access still active. I didn't touch anything, didn't sabotage anything, didn't need to. The infrastructure was collapsing on its own. 3 weeks after my firing, a senior vice president called me, Nathan Coleman. I'd met him twice in 6 years, both times in passing. He ran the entire operations division. Miss Torres, he said, formal and direct. I'm calling because we're experiencing significant system issues, and your name keeps coming up as the person who built our infrastructure. That's correct, I said. I understand you're no longer with the company. That's also correct. I'm going to be blunt. We need help. These systems are critical to our client operations, and we're facing potential contract cancellations. I'd like to bring you back as a consultant to stabilize things. Derek called me 2 weeks ago with the same request. I said, I'm aware. I'm also aware he offered you $75 per hour, which is insulting given your expertise. What would it take to get you back in the building? I thought about it, really thought about it. $200 per hour. Minimum 20 hours per week. Direct reporting to you, not Derek. And I want a written acknowledgement that I attempted to prevent these issues and was ignored. Silence on his end. Done, he said. Can you start Monday? I'll need the contract by Friday, I said. You'll have it by end of business today. He hung up. I sat in my living room, phone in hand, trying to process what had just happened. They needed me. Not Derek's version of me, the invisible worker who stayed quiet. They needed the actual me. And I was going to make them pay for it. The contract arrived that afternoon. $200 per hour, 20-hour minimum per week, reporting directly to Nathan Coleman. and buried in page 3, a clause acknowledging that Vanessa Torres had provided documentation and warnings about system vulnerabilities that were not acted upon prior to her termination. I signed it and sent it back. Monday morning, I walked back into Northpoint Analytics. Same building. Same badge reader at the entrance. I tapped my badge, the one that had never stopped working, and the gate clicked open. The reception area was the same, the elevator was the same. But when I stepped onto the 3rd floor, heads turned. Melissa saw me first. Her eyes went wide. She mouthed, "You're back?" I nodded and kept walking, past my old desk, which was empty now. Monica's things were gone. They hadn't hired another replacement yet. Past Trevor, who stared at his screen and pretended not to see me. Past the conference room where I'd been fired, straight to Nathan Coleman's office. He stood when I entered, shook my hand. "Thank you for coming back. Let's be clear," I said. "I'm not back. I'm a consultant. I'm here to fix your systems, document them properly, and train your team. Then I'm gone." "Understood," he said. "Where do you want to start?" "I need full administrative access restored, and I need a list of every issue that's been reported in the last 3 weeks. He handed me a folder. It was thick. "Derek's aware you're here," Nathan said. "He's not happy about it." "I don't work for Derek anymore," I said. "No," Nathan agreed. "You work for me." I spent the first day assessing the damage. It was worse than I'd expected. The reporting system was completely broken. The backup process had failed for 2 weeks straight. Client data was corrupted in at least 3 accounts. Trevor had tried to fix things by reinstalling software without understanding the configuration. He'd overwritten custom settings I'd spent months perfecting. It would take weeks to rebuild. I started with the most critical issue, the backup system. If we didn't get that running, we risked losing everything. I worked through lunch, didn't take breaks. At 3 p.m., Derek appeared at my desk. "Vanessa." He said my name like it tasted bad. I looked up. "Derek, I wanted to welcome you back." "I'm not back. I'm consulting." His jaw tightened. "Right, well, I'd appreciate if you kept me updated on your progress. I'm still the manager of this team." "I report to Nathan," I said, "but I'll copy you on status emails. I'd prefer direct updates, face-to-face. I'd prefer written communication. Creates a record." We stared at each other. He blinked first. "Fine," he said and walked away. Melissa appeared 5 minutes later. "Oh my God, that was amazing." "What was?" "The way you just shut him down. Everyone saw it." I hadn't been trying to make a scene. I'd just been setting boundaries. But apparently, boundaries were revolutionary in this office. By the end of the first week, I'd stabilized the backup system and repaired the reporting infrastructure. Client deliverables started going out on time again. The error rate dropped to near 0. Nathan sent me an email. "Excellent work. Clients are noticing the improvement." Derek sent me an email too. "Please coordinate all system changes through me before implementing." I forwarded his email to Nathan with a single line, "Clarification on reporting structure requested." Nathan's response came within minutes. "You report to me, proceed as needed." I didn't respond to Derek at all. The second week I started documentation. Every system, every process, every configuration setting. I wrote it in clear language that even someone with minimal technical background could follow. I included screenshots, step-by-step instructions, troubleshooting guides, everything I'd been planning to create before Derek decided I was easy to replace. On Friday, Nathan called me into his office. "I've been getting questions from the executive team," he said. "They want to know what happened. Why did these systems fail so catastrophically?" "Because Derek fired the person who built them," I said, "and nobody else understood how they worked." That's what I told them. "They want a full report? Can you put something together?" I already had. I'd been compiling it all week. I handed him a document, 30 pages. Timeline of system failures. Root cause analysis. Every warning I'd sent that was ignored. Nathan read it in silence, his expression darkened with each page. "This is damning," he said finally. "That's an accurate record of what happened." He looked at me. "You know this makes Derek look incompetent." "Derek is incompetent," I said, "at least when it comes to technical operations." The executive team met on Monday. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it from Melissa. "They grilled Derek for 2 hours," she texted. "Nathan presented your report. Derek tried to blame you for not documenting things." Nathan pulled up emails showing you tried to document everything, and Derek told you to focus on execution instead. I smiled at my phone. Derek looked like he was going to cry. Melissa continued. They asked him why he fired you. He said budget restructuring. Nathan pointed out they hired Monica at half your salary, and she quit after 4 days, and they've now paid you more in consulting fees than they would have paid in your salary. The math was damning. 4 weeks at $200 per hour, 20 hours per week. That was $16,000. My annual salary had been $75,000. They'd paid me nearly a quarter of my yearly salary in a single month. And I was only halfway done with the repairs. Meeting ended with Derek being told to take a few days off, Melissa texted. Paid leave while they review his performance. Paid leave. Corporate speak for, we're building a case to fire you. I felt no sympathy. He'd fired me without warning, without cause, and with cruelty. Now he was learning what it felt like. Derek didn't come back from his paid leave. The announcement came 2 weeks later. Derek Walsh has decided to pursue other opportunities. We thank him for his service and wish him well. Translation: he was fired. Trevor was moved to a different team. The senior analyst position, the one I should have gotten years ago, was quietly eliminated. Nathan called me into his office the same day. We'd like to offer you a permanent position, he said. Not your old role. Something new. Infrastructure director. You'd report directly to me. Full authority over all technical systems. Salary at market rate plus back pay for the weeks you consulted. I thought about it. Really thought about it. What happened to easy to replace? I asked. Nathan had the grace to look uncomfortable. That should never have been said. It was unprofessional and inaccurate. You're the opposite of easy to replace, as we learned the hard way. I want it in writing, I said. An apology. A formal acknowledgement that my termination was unjust, and that my warnings were ignored. Done. And I want a seat at the leadership table. No more being talked over, no more being excluded from decisions that affect my systems. You'll be a director. You'll have that seat automatically. I smiled. Then I accept. We shook hands. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd won something. My first day as infrastructure director started exactly where my last day as a fired employee had ended, in a conference room. But this time, I was leading the meeting. Nathan had assembled the leadership team. Vice presidents, department heads, and me. Vanessa is going to walk us through the system improvements we're implementing, Nathan said. I pulled up my presentation. No fancy graphics. Just facts. 3 months ago, our infrastructure was fragile because it depended on institutional knowledge held by one person. When that person was removed, the systems failed. This wasn't sabotage. This was predictable. I clicked to the next slide. Moving forward, we're implementing mandatory documentation standards. Every system will have complete operational guides. Every process will have at least 2 people trained to handle it. No single points of failure. One of the VPs raised a hand. Won't that slow down development? It'll slow down reckless development, I said. But it'll prevent catastrophic failures. The choice is yours. Move fast and break things, or move deliberately and build things that last. Nathan nodded. We're choosing the second option. I spent the next hour walking them through technical standards, training requirements, and accountability measures. When I finished, the room was quiet. Any questions? I asked. The VP of Sales spoke up. This is going to require culture change. Then they'll learn, I said, or they'll find somewhere else to work. I'm not managing another crisis caused by institutional negligence. Nathan smiled. Questions answered. Let's implement this. 3 months into my new role, the company held an all-hands meeting. Nathan was presenting quarterly results, strong client retention, improved system reliability, several new contracts signed because of our infrastructure stability. I want to acknowledge someone who made this possible, Nathan said. Vanessa Torres, our infrastructure director, rebuilt our systems from the ground up. Her work has directly contributed to our success this quarter. The room applauded. People I'd never met were clapping for me. I stood and waved awkwardly. I'd never been comfortable with public recognition. But it felt different than the invisibility I'd lived with before. This wasn't just acknowledgement, it was respect. After the meeting, several junior analysts approached me. We heard you were fired and came back as a consultant, one said. That's incredible. What's incredible is that it took a crisis for anyone to notice the work I was doing, I said. Don't wait for a crisis. Make yourself visible before you become invisible. They nodded, taking mental notes. One of them asked, "What would you tell someone who feels undervalued?" I thought about Derek's smirk. The termination meeting. The walk through the silent office. Document everything, I said. Build systems that work without you, but make sure people know you built them. And if they still don't value you, find somewhere that will. 6 months after my return, I received a LinkedIn message. It was from Derek. "Vanessa, I wanted to reach out and apologize for how things ended. I made mistakes in my management approach, and I'm working on improving. I hope there are no hard feelings." I stared at the message for a long time. No hard feelings. As if what he'd done was a minor disagreement, as if easy to replace was just an unfortunate choice of words. I typed a response and deleted it. Typed another and deleted that too. Finally, I settled on something simple. "I appreciate you reaching out. I hope your new role works out." I didn't ask where he was working now. Didn't offer to connect. Didn't leave any door open for future contact. I just acknowledged his message and moved on. Because the truth was, I didn't have hard feelings anymore. I had something better: indifference. Derek had hurt me. But in doing so, he'd accidentally freed me. If he hadn't fired me, I'd still be invisible. Still undervalued. Still doing senior-level work for junior-level recognition. His cruelty had forced me to realize my worth, and now I was in a position I never would have reached if he'd kept me comfortable in mediocrity. I closed LinkedIn and went back to work. A year after my firing, Northpoint landed the biggest contract in company history. The client was a Fortune 500 company looking for infrastructure management. They'd interviewed 5 firms. They chose us because of our system reliability and documentation standards. Standards I'd built. The contract was worth $20 million over 3 years. Nathan called me into his office the day we signed. "This wouldn't have happened without you," he said. "The client specifically mentioned our infrastructure stability as a deciding factor." "It's what I built it for," I said. "I know, and I want to make sure you're compensated accordingly." He slid an envelope across the desk. I opened it. A promotion letter. Senior Director of Technical Operations, a 40% salary increase, and a one-time bonus equal to 6 months of my old salary. I looked up at Nathan. "This is generous." "It's overdue," he said. "You were right about everything: the documentation, the training, the system redundancies. You saw problems we couldn't see because we weren't paying attention." "You're paying attention now," I said, "because you made it impossible not to." I signed the promotion letter that afternoon. That evening I took myself out to dinner. Somewhere nice. Somewhere I'd never been able to afford on my old salary. I ordered wine, the good kind, and I toasted to myself. To the woman who'd been fired for being easy to replace. To the woman who'd proven them wrong without saying a word. To me. 2 years after my firing, I was invited to speak at a tech conference about infrastructure resilience. I almost declined. Public speaking wasn't my strength. But Nathan convinced me. "People need to hear your story," he said. So I wrote a presentation. Not just about system architecture, about what happens when companies treat expertise as disposable. I titled it, "The Cost of Easy to Replace." The room was packed. 200 people, mostly women, mostly technical professionals, who'd felt invisible in their own companies. I told them about Derek, about being fired, about watching systems collapse because nobody understood what I'd built. And I told them about coming back, on my terms, with my worth recognized. "The lesson isn't that you should wait to be fired," I said. "The lesson is that your expertise has value, whether or not your employer recognizes it. Don't let anyone convince you that you're replaceable. Make them prove they can replace you." The applause was overwhelming. Afterward, dozens of people approached me. They shared their own stories, their own moments of being undervalued. One woman, probably in her 50s, shook my hand with tears in her eyes. "I've been at my company for 20 years, she said. "I thought I was the problem. Thank you for showing me I'm not." I hugged her. "You're not the problem. Don't forget that." I flew home that night feeling lighter than I had in years. 3 years after my firing, I left Northpoint Analytics. Not because I was fired, not because I was unhappy, but because I'd built something better. I started my own consulting firm specializing in infrastructure resilience and documentation. My first client was a former North Point competitor. My second was a startup that wanted to build systems the right way from the beginning. Within 6 months, I had more work than I could handle. I hired 2 junior consultants, then 4, then 8. We weren't the biggest firm, but we were the best at what we did, and we never ever told anyone they were easy to replace. On the anniversary of my firing, I drove past the North Point building. It looked smaller than I remembered. I thought about Derek, about that conference room, about the moment he'd said those words that had changed everything. Easy to replace. I smiled. He'd been wrong, but I was glad he'd said it, because being told I was replaceable had forced me to prove I wasn't. It had pushed me out of comfort and into power. I wasn't easy to replace. I was irreplaceable. And now, finally, I knew it.